Hello, and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Productions channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another Album of the Week video. This is episode 206. Today's episode, I will be putting a spotlight on another immortal classic, that is Holy Diver. What was the inaugural album for the late, great Dio, originally released on May 25th of 1983 via Warner Brothers Records. Of course, last week was the 12th anniversary of Ronnie James Dio's passing. Of course, with Thursday being the 25th, this will reach 40. So, I guess you can say this is a perfect time to not only celebrate this album's 40th anniversary, but also pay tribute to a legend. With all that said, let's begin. In 1982, cracks began to unfold, with disagreements over the mixing of Black Sabbath's Live Evil album, which was unironically remixed this year, which resulted in the departure of Ronnie James Dio and drummer Vinny Appice from the band. Iommi and Butler would eventually get in replacement, but more on that story at another time, which will come soon this year. Also, at some point by the early 90s, Ronnie James Dio and Vinny Appice would, of course, rejoin Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler for the Dehumanizer album, and therefore their friendship, whatever, would be rekindled, and they would eventually do future collaborations together once more, pretty much until Ronnie James Dio's sudden passing by 2010. But Ronnie and Vinny would continue together as a band. The two formed Dio, beginning in October of 1982, originally though with guitarist Jakey Lee and bassist Jimmy Bain, who had previously been with Ronnie, dating all the way back to their days in Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. About a month after the band's formation, Lee was then replaced by then-former Sweet Savage guitarist Vivian Campbell. Thus, the classic lineup is set in stone. So by 1983, they would head to Sound City Studios in Van Nuys, California, to record of what would become Holy Diver. And by May 25th, the world would hear the voice of Ronnie James Dio again, this time post Black Sabbath, and thus Dio's status as one of rock and roll's greatest voices would then be immortalized. So, featuring 9 tracks, clocking it at the length of 41 minutes and 46 seconds, these 9 tracks are, well, so just from the opening track, Stand Up and Shout, to of course, the immortal title track, Gypsy, Caught in the Middle, Don't Talk to Strangers, Straight Through the Heart, Invisible, of course the other mega hit song off of this album, Rainbow in the Dark, and then finally ending with Shame on the Night. So there it is, there's your 9 tracks. You know, what can I say that hasn't already been said, by countless of others? But all I can do is give you my personal relationship that I've had living with this classic album, which is the best that I can do as to pay tribute to the late, great Ronnie James Dio. For years, all I knew was Rainbow in the Dark, with that sort of goofy video that I got exposed to back on Metal Mania when it was on VH1 Classics. And then, of course, the video to Holy Diver, which I think I first saw on YouTube when I finally was moved up to Susanville, and those several couple of months, whatever, maybe by late 2007, early 2008, when I was living in a trailer park in a fifth wheel. again, just to keep myself occupied and entertained, I began going to YouTube and I would just search up some of these rock music videos. And that's when I finally wanted to check out some more stuff from Dio. And I think that's how I first saw and heard Holy Diver, the song itself. But my first exposures to the voice of Dio goes all the way back to when I discovered my dad's copy of Dehumanizer, which I already had covered on this channel as a Album of the Week episode. I think it was last year, around its anniversary. Soon much later, I would dive straight into the other two classic Black Sabbath albums he performed on, and of course his stuff with Rainbow, which was even before I ended up checking out like Heaven and Hell and The Mob Rules. And it was I think it was Catch the Rainbow, the anthology of Rainbow, and which that whole first disc was all like Dio era material. So from the debut album all the way up to Long Live Rock and Roll. And that's kind of my introduction to some of his other stuff, because my only recollection of ever hearing anything prior, even probably around the time I first heard Dehumanizer, was Difficult to Cure, which is Joe Lynn Turner. And then, of course, there was his cameo in that Tenacious D, was it the Pick of Destiny film? Which I know that for a kid of my age, probably should have seen that at a very young, but whatever. We were all into Jack Black and everything, and I was just, again, diving more into other sort of rock or metal, whatever. Oh yeah, and that's right, I think the only other Dio album I actually ever heard at the time, because my brother borrowed it from the library, was Strange Highways. But I think that might have been during the same period when I saw the Pick of Destiny film. And again, just seeing Ronnie James Dio in that film was one of my first times actually seeing any other, just any film presence or anything of him. Because I mean, other than maybe documentaries or interviews, whatever, because I would, at some point, would even rent, like, documentary metal films, whatever, from, I think it was Hollywood Video. I'd rent them from, at least when it was still around, because I'm one of the few people maybe one of those people these days who still remembers when there was a Hollywood Video. But that's what I would do, and even, I think, was it on VH1 Classic as well, was it the Heavy, the Story of Metal special, whatever it was? And that's just, it was my only recollection of seeing anything Ronnie James Dio that wasn't just in audio form, actually seeing video of him and seeing what he looked like. But it was by the summer of 2009 when I would eventually pick up a copy of Holy Diver, which is from a Walmart, finally, because up to that point, after checking out and really digging, Rainbow in the Dark and the song Holy Diver, I wanted to actually own a copy of it, but I can never really find much of a copy unless if I looked hard enough at Raspinen, or whenever I would make my trips here to Fresno, So, just like everybody else, I ate it up. From the first seconds of the face-ripping sounds, that is, Stand Up and Shout, I was instantly pulled straight in. Of course, the title track is iconic, but after that, if I have to be honest, the album afterwards, to me, on my first initial listens, took a slight different tone. Nothing came close to being as explosive as that album opener was, But I soon began getting hooked. The one thing Ronnie had for him was knowing how to properly use diversity. Still guitar-driven, but still packs a hell of a punch and are filled with as many hooks. My favorites, besides Stand Up and Shout and the title track, are Gypsy, Don't Talk to Strangers, which is prime Ronnie James Dio. The lyrics and his wordings are all present on this song, with themes surrounding the practices of deceit and lies that powerful figures can produce onto those who may be otherwise weak and emotionally invulnerable. Ronnie was freaking great at making the listener think about that kind of stuff. Then there is Invisible, which over the years has become one of my all-time favorite Dio songs, behind Stand Up and Shout. Again, fantastic lyrics. Therein then there is the album ender, Shame on the Night, which kind of gives me both Rainbow and Elf vibes, channeling his bluesier side here, but for some reason, it sounds more realized than compared to previously, and it has this overall toughness to it that just elevates Dio's persona. It's just brilliant work, because he's really established a character here, because before that, it was just more of a working development, and he was beginning to kind of develop something, when he was with Rainbow. But by the time he entered Black Sabbath, you can hear it even more developed further, and by this album, it's already been fully developed. It's more realized, and so when he was able to kind of revisit his earlier stuff, his earlier sound, he just somehow was able to kind of make it work and freshen it up more, and somehow it just sounds more realized. He was able to kind of make things even more better than before. And I know I don't want to take anything away from what he did before, because I love the stuff with Rainbow. But I haven't really delved too much into Elf, but I've heard some small stuff. But when he's able to take some of that type of stuff from his sound or style from the old Elf albums and some of those early Rainbow material, somehow he just was able to kind of infuse it, but yet somehow it feels even more developed and more realized. So I hope you're kind of getting what I'm going with that, but that's just the way I feel the way he tackled Shame on the Night. It's just taking what he did, but applying his already more developed character persona, and it's elevated more, and it just sounds even more special. You know what I mean? So there you go. Of course, the other songs are great, but the ones that I mentioned are the ones that I feel truly stand out to me when thinking of this legendary record. And with, of course, Dio's passing, this album became a frequent player, and on those long-ass drives through Oregon that my parents had to drag me along to, this album made things more calmer. So I really began to develop a personal relationship with Holy Diver. And really, it just became a true testament to such a classic album. And, great. Of course, last year, this received a deluxe 4-disc edition, with one of the discs being a newly remixed version, and with one of the discs being recorded in my home city of Fresno at the Selland Arena, which was the arena for big bands and even wrestling and other great bigger events. But once the Save Mart Center was built, the Selland Arena became an afterthought, so it's no longer the king of the crop for primetime events here in Fresno. So it is what it is. The more you know, folks. So there you have it, Holy Diver. For those who've spent countless of times listening to this, you know what to do. But even if you have any thoughts, whether they are either positive or negative, you can leave them in the comment section below. But if you have never listened to Holy Diver, what were you even doing by clicking on this video? If you've gotten this far, all I can say is, go grab yourself a copy, period. So with that, this is Herbert Thrash saying I am out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.